So today we're going to be looking at the world of stone circles, not only famous stone circles such as Stonehenge and Avebury that we find in England, but we'll find that it's a worldwide phenomenon. So my name's Hugh Newman. I'm a researcher, explorer, megalithomaniac and giantologist. Here's some of the books I've been writing over the years. The most latest one that I contributed to is this one called Megalith Studies in Stone, where we go into the phenomena of stone circles. Now, stone circles, we just think of Stonehenge, we think maybe of Avebury, and that's pretty much it. But Britain alone has over 1,000 recorded megalithic circles, going back potentially to around 7,000 years ago, with some sites in the western northern area of Ireland. But what we're going to look at today is not only the British ones, but the worldwide phenomena. And these include places such as Göbekli Tepe in southeast Turkey, Karahunj in Armenia, and even circles in Australia, amongst many other places. So we're going to look at the strange discoveries and some obscure information about Stonehenge and Avebury, looking at the work of Alexander Thom and how he decoded the mathematics, the metrology and the astronomy of these megalithic rings. Also the ley lines and legends of giants and grids and other such things that are associated with these sites. And we're going to then look at some examples around the world and some modern stone circles. Now the phenomenon is having a resurgence around the world, but most fundamentally we're going to look at who built them and why on earth they were constructed. Stonehenge, the most famous stone circle on the planet. This image here is from 1790, one of the beautiful paintings from one of the antiquarians, and it proves as well that it wasn't built in the 1950s, this kind of internet hoax about some reconstruction and excavation that took place then. People seem to think it was built then, and it most certainly wasn't. This is kind of what it looks like today. This is a group of us megalithomaniacs after the Megalithomania conference a couple of years ago. But the thing about Stonehenge, it's not just the stone circle we see today. It's been around, or part of it at least, for about 10,000 years. So going back into the Mesolithic era. Salisbury Plain itself, where the stones are placed, is an unusual place to put them. It's on a slope, and it kind of slopes at a certain angle. It's got hills around it in certain areas, so it's an unusual sighting. You'd expect a flat plain or a more beautiful valley like we find Castle Rig in Cumbria. But the fact is, it's not just the stone circle we're looking at when we look at Stonehenge. There's a vast landscape across many, many miles. These include two cursuses. One of them is nearly 2 miles long. We have over 100 mounds or tumuli in the area. We even have long barrows and pits, and even Blick Mead, which is a site, a Mesolithic site that goes back again to around 10,000 years old. Now, if we look at it in context with other stone circles, we can see that the only really early part of Stonehenge are the gigantic wooden post holes, which are, like I said, 8,000 BC. It wasn't really again until around 2,600 BC that the stones were really being constructed, although there is evidence that the henge itself was built around 3,000 or a bit earlier. But this just puts it in context with some of the other examples we're going to be looking at in this lecture. This gives a kind of generalized view of the construction. So just over 3000 BC, we have the henge or the ditch, and the heelstone may have been placed there. The heelstone is the one that is aligned to the summer solstice sunrise. So in this image here, we can see that there's a ditch, or the henge was built around 3200 or so BC. The Aubrey holes, which are the 56 holes around the edge, which were thought potentially to have wooden posts in them, were done a little bit later. Then we have a bluestone semicircle. Now these bluestones came all the way from Wales, from the Preseli Mountains, and we'll talk about them in more detail in a moment. And then we have the 4 station stones here as well, which form a rectangle, but if you split it in half, it becomes what's called a lunation triangle, which we'll look at shortly. It wasn't until about 2800 BC or maybe 2600 BC the large sarsen stones were added. They're the main stone trilithons that we see at the site today. Associations with giants go back a very long time at Stonehenge. The earliest known name of Stonehenge is called the Giant's Dance. It's not Stonehenge. Stonehenge itself is a later Saxon name, and it basically means hanging stones. This is a representation of what they think is Merlin here, with King Ambrosius and a giant moving one of the lintels into place. Now, the reason these are associated with Stonehenge is because of the history of the kings of Britain, written by Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 1100s, where he describes not only the foundations of Britain and battling with giants who inhabited this land from a very early epoch, but also the fact that the stones of Stonehenge were from Africa, from North Africa originally, and they were transported over to Ireland at a place called Killaroos, and eventually ended up at where we see them today, at Salisbury Plain. And so this is a representation of what is said in the book, where Merlin was instructed by King Ambrosius to bring the stones over to this area from Ireland to create Stonehenge as a burial place for this great king. Now, we don't know how much historical fact or how much is kind of folklore mixed in to the workings and the writings of Geoffrey of Monmouth, but this is the earliest image ever created of Stonehenge itself. So this is quite an intriguing that it's got a giant associated, which is something we've been researching. But the most famous aspect of Stonehenge is the summer solstice sunrise, which is basically a northeast alignment from the stones, and every 21st of June or thereabouts you can witness the sun rising just next to or just over the heel stone, which is in the distance here from the main circle. But originally there may have been two, so there may have been one next to it, and a few thousand years ago when this was built, that's probably when the sun would rise between these particular stones. But the same alignment, but going in the opposite direction, is the winter solstice sunrise. So it's now thought that this may have been the main orientation, was more to do with the winter solstice sunrise than it was to do with the winter solstice sunset, which could have been more important than the summer solstice sunrise. These are the post holes. This was taken a few years ago. This has now been changed. There's no car park in this particular area, and the whole visitor centre is about a mile away from the main stone circle. But I like this photo because these mark where these 10,000 year old timber posts were once placed. Now, these could have been huge totem poles. They could have been carved. There may have even been more of them. They're roughly east-west, so they could have been marking a particular alignment, potentially the equinox. But the fact is, this site was being marked 10,000 years ago, or 8,000 BC, which is at least 5,000 or 6,000 years before any other part of the circle was constructed. Why this is interesting is because Amesbury and the area around it, and Salisbury Plain, is the oldest continually inhabited area in Britain by far. And it's been like that for over 10,000 years. And one of the sites there is Blickmead, where it's a Mesolithic flint kind of production area, which is just east of Stonehenge, just along the A303 really. Some damage has recently been done to it when they were excavating, and they were working on making some research on the tunnels that are proposed to be built there. But the fact is, this is one of the most important sites in the whole area, but you can't visit it, it's on private land. But hopefully it's going to be protected from this tunnel that may or may not be built in the years to come. We have these are quite interesting as well. This is from the heelstone itself. There's a suggestion, just before we begin this section about what this triangle is, that the heelstone may have been a natural stone that was found around the area of Stonehenge, and it may have been there for 10,000 or even perhaps tens of thousands of years. But the interesting thing is there's an alignment between some pits that are found on this cursus going all the way along here. This is ridiculously long. It's about just over 2 kilometers long, I think, and no one knows what this is for. These are basically ditches, parallel ditches with mounds and a shaped one end of it. But there's these certain pits here which seem to mark where other post holes were. And from the heelstone, this would mark the summer solstice sunrise and the solstice sunset, circa 3,500 BC. So it's suggested that that could have been the first bit of astronomy that was actually done at the site at Stonehenge itself. This is the famous view you see today when you go there for the summer solstice sunrise. You see thousands of people, up to like 20,000 people sometimes go there. But that may not be the main orientation. Like I said, it could be the winter solstice sunset. Another stone circle was discovered just down near the river Avon in Amesbury. And this is Stonehenge here, down on the bottom here. And this is the Great Avenue. Most of this is you can't see anymore, but this part you can. That's the summer solstice sunrise going that way, or the winter solstice sunset going that way. And it's thought that Durrington Walls and Woodhenge up here is where the people used to hang out, where great meetings took place at various times of year. They would come down the river, come up off the river here, at a place called what they think there used to be a blue stone circle. They call it Blue Stonehenge now, and we'll walk up the avenue to the main stone circle. This is a theory, but what has been found here is remarkable because they found what they think is another stone circle. It could even be older than Stonehenge itself, and what's really interesting is that they found blue stone fragments within it, which are from Wales, from the Preseli Mountains in Wales. So it's like the builders were saying, look, we're from Wales, we created this site, this is our area now, many thousands of years ago. So this is fascinating, as we can see. And we see this is what's left of the avenue here. You can see segments of it. I managed to get some photos of it over here. And you've got the New King Barrows. These are the only ones that have not been excavated in the entire area. The rest of them have been excavated. But this just shows you the length of the Great Avenue, which is a mystery in itself. This is one plan, of what Blue Stonehenge could have looked like. 27 stones potentially, 33 feet wide. Mike Parker Pearson, who's the top archaeologist who was researching this site, thinks maybe the stones were moved from here and incorporated into Stonehenge itself with the blue stones that we see at the site today. This just shows you the whole landscape really, or some of it at least, what we're dealing with here. We've got Stonehenge in the middle there. We've got the cursus, we've got a destroyed cursus here. All these mounds, I mean there's hundreds of them all around the area. We've got Blickmead just over here. Durrington Walls, which is one of the largest henges in the country. Woodhenge here, like a wooden circle. And many other things happening across this delightful landscape. This is what the avenue looks like now from the air. If you take a drone up or you get a jetpack and you can kind of see it. Here, this is the heel stone here with the main circle and henge linked to this with some mounds in the background. Over here we have the Bush Barrow mounds and Normanton Down Barrow group. So a few years ago, there was the Hidden Landscape project for Stonehenge, which was a 4-year collaboration with some Austrian archaeologists and universities. And they did Lidar scanning of the entire landscape, and they found numerous sites that had never been seen before. Vince Gaffney, an archaeologist, he was involved, and they found mounds, they found henges, they found pits, they found all these burials that are hidden from the naked eye but could be seen with Lidar. One of the things they found as well, what some other researchers put together, this is by Derek Cunningham from 2014. Once the accurate measurements were found with Lidar, they found that the mound next to Stonehenge is a perfect correspondence with Stonehenge itself. So this is the shape of the size of the Earth, this is the size of the Moon, and they're perfectly represented in the landscape as in a ratio. And also what's interesting, Michael Schneider and various other researchers, John Michel and others, have come up with this, that they realised the plan of Stonehenge, again, is linked with the Earth and the Moon in miniature. And you can see here the way that the Stonehenge stones actually represent, or the inner circle actually represents like the Earth. Then the outer stones, the main trilithons, represents the centre of where the moons would be, and it also marks here the nature of the way the moon would fit within the structure itself. And so we have remarkable correspondence. They were encoding lunar and solar and earthly phenomena within one stone circle itself. However, the stones have been moved around, as we saw earlier, so things have changed over the millennia. Another fascinating aspect, this was discovered by the brilliant Robin Heath. He found this great lunation triangle. Now we saw the lunation triangle within the stone circle itself, the 4 station stones. Now these would be represented here, but if you expand that from within Stonehenge 2,500 times, you get this 5, 12, 13 Pythagorean triangle, or 2 of them really, across the landscape. And what's fascinating about this, if it's just placed bang on the bottom right corner with Stonehenge, it hits Lundy Island, which is the shape of a corner, an elbow here, and the bluestone site where the bluestones came from in Wales. And so we have this remarkable correspondence that perhaps the Stonehenge builders were not only encoding where they came from, they were encoding where the stones came from themselves. So this is a remarkable discovery made by Robin Heath. It's really just the tip of the iceberg, because he's applied this to many other sites across England and Britain and found some remarkable correspondences suggesting there was a very advanced survey of Britain done in ancient times. Lundy Island is very interesting as well. We'll look at that in a moment. But this area here, I went to investigate this 2 summers ago. And this is one of the bluestone outcrops in the Preseli Mountains. And you can see there's actual shaping and cutting and carving of stones. And this has been used potentially for thousands of years before and after Stonehenge was constructed. Now, this is the classic spotted dolerite bluestone, which we find is the main component of some of the stones in Stonehenge. But there's also a rhyolite quarry nearby, which was researched and excavated by Mike Parker Pearson and his team in, I think, beginning about 4 or 5 years ago. This is an aerial shot of this outcrop here, but clearly you can see the shaped and cut stones, this one here, sitting in the quarry still. Only about 2 stones at Stonehenge are made of this particular type of bluestone, but the fact is they found evidence here of potential work in the stone, which would have then been transported to Stonehenge itself in a very complicated, very difficult way. But we see that it's not only this 5, 12, 13 triangle. We actually get a huge 3, 4, 5 triangle, again linked to Stonehenge here, with other stone circles around England and in Anglesey in Wales. And these were all originally stone circles. This is now a recumbent stone circle. This has now been turned into a chambered tomb, but was originally a stone circle. So the fact is we're finding remarkable connections using basic Pythagorean geometry, thousands of years before Pythagoras was even born, stretched across the entire landscape of England. But not just that. If we extend this line here between Stonehenge and the Preseli Bluestone site, and we take it all the way around the world, it actually goes very close to Delphi, Giza in Egypt, Mecca, and all the way around through Serpent Mound in Ohio and back through the Carrowmore and Carrowkeel megalithic complex, where some of the oldest stone circles in Britain are thought to exist. Again, this was discovered by Robin Heath when he was researching for one of his excellent books about Stonehenge. I went to Lundy Island with Robin Heath back in 2008, also with my good friend Stuart Mason and a group of lay hunters, the Lay Hunters Society. This is what it looks like from the air, and you can see that, you can't see it clearly, but it kind of goes off like this, and it's like a slight L shape. And this kind of Robin found this intriguing because this sort of marks the shape of the corner of the lunation triangle. There's me in my long-haired days on the right there, and these are the lay hunters and Stuart and Robin using a theodolite, a classic surveying tool, which is rarely used today because of modern digital technologies. But we went there specifically, one of the main reasons was to investigate a potential stone circle, and we actually discovered one, a lost stone circle on Lundy Island. And we were very pleased with our discovery. We were helping Robin with the surveying, and it's an interesting egg-shaped, it's like an egg geometry. This is one of the selection of geometries that have been found in stone circles all over Britain, which we'll look at more closely. This is the work of Alexander Thom. And it's very buried in the ground. You can barely see it, just some of the tops of the stones are popping out, but it's there, and yet it's completely ignored. No one is interested in this whatsoever, but the discovery's been made and it's on record and it's been published. But also on Lundy, down here, There are some other interesting burials. These are supposedly 5th century burials with inscribed stones. But also, when we were researching a few years ago, Jim Vieira and I came up with, we found a couple of accounts talking about over 8-foot tall skeletons on Lundy Island. So again, we've got these giants connections, again kind of linked to Stonehenge in a large geodetic way. But more than one account was found of over 8-foot skeletons on Lundy Island, but we'll get into that in one of the other lectures. There are many other stone circles, obviously. Stanton Drew is one of the most important. There's a debate, it's either the 2nd or 3rd largest stone circle, the main circle at least, but this is actually a triple stone circle. So potentially it's the 2nd or 3rd largest in Britain. We also have the Cove over here, which is a selection of stones that would have been some kind of outlier, potentially linking it astronomically with the main site. It's 113 meters or 370 feet in diameter. There's only 26 surviving uprights of the main circle now. There would have been at least 30. There's 2 other circles to the southwest and the northeast. Both are smaller, and not too many stones are there now. But this is in Somerset, so this is quite a rarity in Somerset. But some scans were done in 1997, and concentric circles were found within the main stone circle. So English Heritage were involved in this, and it was a proper geophysical survey, and they found pits, ditches and hearths and other such things. And they dated it to about 3000 to 2000 BC. This is as accurate as they could get because it's been used over and over again by different cultures. And it was made a scheduled monument in 1982. There's different types of stone. There's oolitic limestone from the Jurassic Age, different types of sandstone, all from a relatively local area, but some come from several miles away, so they would have had to transport these absolutely huge blocks. This is an artist impression. This is actually from the DVD called Standing with Stones. And this is what they thought it could have looked like. These they put wooden posts in here with the megaliths around the edge and the great henge. And this is just an impression of what it could have looked like. This is what it looked like in the 1700s. This was done in 1973 by William Stukeley. And you can see the smaller stone circle, the main circle, and there's another one here. And you can see there's kind of concentric circles in there. So it was still noted in the 1700s. Then we have the Cove over here in the garden now of the Druid Arms pub. There was another site as well. There was another kind of dolmen or quoit, which was found nearby. It could have been more than one stone, but only one stone still remains. It's on a private farm. You can't really go there anymore. But this is a picture of the Cove next to the church. And we now have a pub built around this as well. And you can still visit this, and it's perfectly in the garden of a local public house. So this is kind of what it looks like from the air. It's just an aerial shot I took with the drone. And you can get a sense of the scale here. It's a perfect circle, the main circle. It's a bit windy, so the drone's getting knocked around all over the place. But it gives you a sense of scale. And even going down to the river here, there was thought potentially to be an avenue of stones. We're not sure exactly where they were, but there was potentially an avenue there, which is quite unusual for Somerset. We only really find that in very few sites. But one of the sites you do find that in is Avebury, which we'll take a look at in a moment. So you just get a sense of scale here of the great Stanton Drew stone circles. So Avebury itself, this is possibly the most important site really in the whole of Britain. I mean, it's on par with Stonehenge in its kind of magnificence, but it's much, much bigger. I mean, John Aubrey wrote in the 17th century, it does as much exceed in greatness the so renowned Stonehenge as a cathedral doeth a parish church, because it's so large. I mean, these stone circles here within the centre, each one of these is larger than Stonehenge. And you've got 2 of these here. This isn't the best illustration here, but it's not just the stone circles we're dealing with Avebury. We're dealing with a huge megalithic landscape temple. Now this might be a slightly fanciful version, which was illustrated by William Stukeley in the 1700s, but this just shows you the main circle here with these avenues. This is mostly destroyed now. There's like 2 stones left down here. Some of these are still here, From here to here, it's been destroyed. The sanctuary is now just a bunch of concrete and stumps up on a hilltop with some mounds next to it, and the main road kind of goes through here. But unfortunately, most of these stones have been taken down. This was done a lot in the 1600s by certain people, local people, who believed that it was the work of the devil. Particularly a guy called Stone Killer Robinson, that was his nickname, and you can understand why. And actually John Aubrey, William Stukeley saw these being destroyed and was absolutely distressed by what was going on. This is a fantastic reconstruction of what it may have looked like. This is put together by Nicholas Mann, who's written some excellent books, one on Avebury. And you can see the great henge here is absolutely huge, and it would have been exposed chalk, possibly like Stonehenge would have been, with the stone circles in the centre and other features within it, like a cove and so forth, and the avenues going off in various directions. This is it from ground level, what it may have looked like. So it's a remarkable site, and the outer circle may have had 99 stones. It dates to at least 2600 BC, but it could be earlier. There is evidence of earlier construction in the area with West Kennet Long Barrow, which is 3600 BC. It's more likely around 3000 BC. It was being built and used before Stonehenge. This is what, just to give a sense of scale, these are just a couple of stones in the centre of one of the circles. This is our group here from a few years ago. And the geometry is quite interesting as well. This is the plan originally done by Alexander Thom, and he got baffled by this place. It's such an unusual shape and geometry. He thought perhaps it could have even been a kind of randomly designed site, but more research was done on it. This is a guy called John Smoot who did this in 2009 and realised, no, actually there's some very important hidden geometry within this site. And he came up with this. Not only was he finding Pythagorean triangles, he was finding very specific angles and geometries that hadn't been noted before using earlier plans. And the 99 stones is very interesting. If there was 99, some people say there's 98, some people say there's 100. But if it is 99, that's exactly the same amount of stones you find in the perimeter of the Kalasasaya temple in Tiwanaku in Bolivia, which is strangely similar to Avebury. This is Tom's and Smoot's design put into one graphic here. But there was potentially not only the 2 stone circles within the main circle, there may have been 3. There's evidence in 1937 that another one was found just going out towards one of the entrances on the northern part of the henge. And it was Keeler, who was one of the restorers really of Stonehenge in the 1930s, who thought he may have found this 3rd stone circle, but this was never really clarified or confirmed. So Alexander Thom, this is really the guy who put stone circles back on the map. Born in Scotland in 1894, he studied at Glasgow University. He was also a lecturer and professor of engineering at Oxford University. He died in 1985, but as early as 1934, Thom had become interested in stone circles, and in 1951 he made his first publications about, believing they were solar observatories, and he went round Britain and surveyed accurately using a proper theodolite over 300 circles in Britain, and some of them have actually been destroyed or ruined since then. And he came up with some amazing results. He got ridiculed, he got attacked by the academia, and he had his career pretty much ruined because of it. But he found what is called the megalithic yard, which is 2.72 feet or 0.83 meters, which he believed was a unit of measure that was used all across Britain and potentially around the world. He found evidence of this also in Brittany in France. He found 6 types of stone circles. A true circle, like a perfect circle, ellipses, 2 types of egg-shaped circles. We saw the egg shape, one of them at least, in Lundy, and 2 sorts of flattened circles, A and B, which we'll look at some examples of these in the next few slides. But he found that the geometry and the measurement systems he was discovering and the astronomy all linked together into a coherent science that he believed the ancients were using. However, like I said, he got attacked and ridiculed. But if you look deeply into his work and you actually read the books he wrote, they're incredibly challenging, very mathematical. He does it in a very academic language, so they're really quite hard to get your head around. But if you do get your head around them, you find this hidden meaning, and you realize that the ancients were speaking really to us in the geometrical form or the mathematical form. It wasn't just to do with, hieroglyphs and things like this, that the ancients were actually using this as their way of showing you how very sophisticated they are. For example, this is the flattened A. This is Castle Rig, one of the most beautiful stone circle settings in Britain, up in Cumbria. And you can just see the way he's constructed this, and basically believes they were constructed using ropes and stakes and things like this, and you sort of go from one spot to another, then you do certain curves, and then you do another curve, and so forth. We've actually done this ourselves. We'll see later in the lecture, we actually built a couple of stone circles myself, Sean Kerwin, and also John Martineau, to get a sense of how they would have done this. But this just shows you one of the ways they would construct this. This is what it actually looks like now from the air. This is thanks to Hamish Fenton, courtesy of him. We have this photo. Another stone circle in Cumbria. We have, this one's a flattened B. It's called Long Meg and Her Daughters. This is quite a large stone circle, as we can see down here, with an outlier, little Long Meg, which is over to the left here. You can see a better version over here. This is the main stone, the massive 12-foot standing stone with a huge stone circle around it. This has associations with giants. The Long Meg herself was thought to be a giant. As other stories of different folklore and legends associated with the site. One of the stories is that when it was first being excavated, or they were trying to damage it to build these caves nearby, a huge lightning and thunderstorm took over, and it stopped construction. I even drove here myself in my camper van many years ago and parked inside this stone circle. There's a road going through it, and a huge storm, thunder and lightning, terrified me, but suggesting that these ancient stories may be true, and you don't mess with these ancient sites. This shows you one of the spiral carvings we find on the site itself, on the Long Meg stone, the 12-foot stone, and a beautiful little poem about this. But this really is, an interesting part of the country. We see some of the largest stone circles up in this area, but also some of the earliest. Some of these date to around 2900 or so BC. But these carvings and these spirals, which you can just about see here, we do find all over the country. Up in Scotland, Ireland, even around the world, we have examples. And if we head further north, we find these. Now, admittedly, this one is actually a Roman metal dodecahedron, but just want to give you an example. And these are all about the size you fit in your hand. Many of these are found in Aberdeenshire. 420 have been discovered, and they're linked with stone circles. That's why we included them here. They're at least 2000 BC, but they could be older. The reason this date has been given is because they're found in these certain type of recumbent stone circles we find in northern Scotland, which are potentially Bronze Age around this date. But the thing is, you found the five platonic solids have been recorded within these spheres. There's many different geometries, ranging from 4 sides up to something like 80-sided pieces, and then you have these beautiful Archimedean and Pythagorean geometries here, absolutely remarkable. And you find ones like this with grids and spirals and other such things all over. And the stone circles, this is actually one of the stone circles in Aberdeenshire. This is called Sun Honey, which is a pretty name, inside a kind of wood there. And you can see it's a circle here, different geometries with this feature here, which we'll look at more closely. Over 150 of these have been found, at least. There were hundreds more potentially. And they're built high on high land with a clear southern horizon, with this massive recumbent block with these 2 flanker stones, they call them. And the large blocks, the recumbent blocks, are up to 60 tons each, often oriented to the southwest, which would be the winter solstice sunrise, and there's different versions. Some are slightly different orientation, and you can just see this. Hang on a sec. This one is one of the other ones we visited. Absolutely beautiful site. And you can just see the landscape. These are set within, often 60 to 80 feet wide. Here's one that's actually been kind of Christianized. They built a church right around it. You can just get a sense. It's quite confusing. You've got the great flankers here and the recumbent stone here with the small, this one's a particularly small one, but they've left it there. They haven't destroyed it, which is pretty cool. And you can see this is built within a churchyard. There's many other stone circles right in this area. But because we're at around 57 degrees latitude, which is quite far north, at certain times of the moon, the 18.6 year moon cycle, the moon rolls across the landscape and doesn't set at particular times. And it's thought that this here may have been a kind of viewing platform to make these observations. And they date to around 2700 to 2000 BC. Also in Scotland, we have quite an interesting circle. This is the Glenquicken circle. Again, this is, pretty much, a circle, pretty much a straightforward circle, but they did find something quite intriguing here. A man of uncommon size was dug up, suggesting it may have been associations with giants. There were many other stone circles in Scotland that we've investigated and we feature in the book I've written called Stone Circles and Megalith Studies in Stone. If we go over to Ireland, we see this is one of the most beautiful sites. This is called Beltane. So it's got an association with Beltane. It seems to have an alignment, but it seems like it may have been a mound within a circle, and it's quite late. It's about 1400 to 800 BC. 64 stones around a kind of mound or tumulus, and there's different carvings on it. There's even a head carved on one of them, and it's believed it was, and it still is celebrated on May Day. People go there and celebrate it, and there are alignments with the May Day sunrise. And you can see these are all the cairns and the stone structures that were built within the main circle itself. There are other stone circles, other very late stone circles. This is in Northern Ireland. Both these are in Northern Ireland, actually. These were only discovered in the 1940s. And these are multiple stone circles. They're very small, but they're very small stones as well, and not very large in diameter. And these are really the closing of, these are about 1200, 1500 or so BC. And these really are the closing of the megalithic construction in Britain. Everything changed after this. Smaller stones were starting to be used. They were building hill forts. They were building different types of structures, earthen structures and so forth, and less stone. So we've had a brief history of the British Isles. There's many more than this, because there are over 1,000 stone circles in the British Isles alone. But it's a beautiful site to visit. We called it a sunset, and you can see the avenues coming off here as well. We find similar examples on Dartmoor like this, down in the southwest. Very intriguing cairns and different shapes encoded within this particular site. But it's not just Britain. There's a whole world of stone circles that we're going to have a look at now. For example, I'll just give you a quick outline. This is the one, this is actually Swinside in Cumbria. This is in Peru. This is in Libya. This is in Armenia, and this is in Argentina. So you can see there's a lot more going on than just Stonehenge. So this is the list we looked at earlier, and this just gives you a kind of date list really of what was going on around the world. The oldest, which we're going to look at first, is Göbekli Tepe, which is one of the most remarkable sites on the planet. Now, this dates to at least 9,500 BC, maybe 9,600, maybe a bit older. I first went here back in 2013 with Andrew Collins, Graham Hancock. We did a tour there, and we were investigating the site before they built a roof on it. And this is an absolutely fascinating site because this incorporates multiple stone circle structures with these beautifully cut T-shaped pillars with beautiful 3D relief carvings on them. You can see some of the relief carvings of the various animals here. This just shows you one of the enclosures, and these are some of the other. This is broken, but there's all these T-shaped. This is still being excavated currently, and they've got a brand new roof all over it. But there's serpents carved on here, multiple animals. There's an array of almost like a zoo of different animals carved onto these stones. No one knows who did it, exactly why they did it. The fact that it's potentially 9,600 BC is remarkable because no one around the world was supposed to be doing anything like this at that particular time. We have some interesting orientation. This is something that Andrew Collins and Rodney Hale and others have been working on. And the way they worked with this site is quite intriguing, quite confusing, because they would build these stone circle structures on bedrock, and they were being the stones were almost balanced within these very shallow pits. They would have around roughly 12 stones around the edge in an oval shape, with 2 large ones in the middle at a certain orientation. And over in this area here, often in the north part, there would be a hole in one of the stones, which potentially could have been an alignment to the northern stars, which would have been at the time Cygnus and Deneb and all the Cygnus constellation stars. This is something that Andrew Collins has been very focused on. There's even potentially, this is one of the main stones in enclosure D, and this shows you what looks like astronomical symbols here. We've got almost like Cygnus here, we've got Scorpius, we've got other features, and each of these could have resembled different constellations. There's arguments about what these are. Some people, including Jim Vieira, believe they're man bags, and they've been found all over the world at various different sites. And it could have been some kind of device or some sacred holder where they would carry their various sacred instruments or sacraments in. Other variations on the astronomy suggest Sirius in the south may have been part of the alignment, but it's thought that they wouldn't have been able to see that at that time because of the nature of, if you actually go back in time far enough with the different computer programs, you would barely be able to see that in the sky. So it's unlikely that they were worshipping something they could barely see. This was put together by archaeoastronomer Giulio Magli. But Göbekli Tepe is really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to super ancient sites. To me, it's one of the most important discoveries ever made. It was only discovered in 1996. Klaus Schmidt was the main excavator at the site. It's now been taken over by an English archaeologist, and they built this roof over it. It's now a World Heritage Site, and discoveries coming and going. There's a few discoveries have been made. There's some remarkable carved stone artifacts in San Liurfa Museum, including Urfa Man, which is 10,000 years old itself. This is one of the earliest humanoid statues. But it really is rewriting the history books, because it's thought that the earliest cultures were either the Egyptians or the Sumerians or potentially the stone circle builders of Britain. But this pushes the date so far back that it's rewriting the history books, and really it's a revelation in the study of archaeology. But there are other sites catching up with this date. One of the other sites, which is very intriguing, is a megalithic semicircle underwater off the coast of Israel. These are like, over half a ton each of these stones. They have cut marks on them as well, which is what we find at Göbekli Tepe and at other sites in Britain. These little scoop marks, like ice cream scoops. And they're arranged, these particular ones are arranged around a freshwater spring. And this dates to around 7,000 BC or a little bit younger. And so, the fact that it's been submerged suggests is at least this date, this era. So it's absolutely fascinating. We can't really go there now, but apparently it's not too deep, so you could dive there. But there are other sites in Portugal. It's got a surprising series of cromlechs, they're called there, but really they're kind of stone circle arrangements. They're not quite circle, they're slightly different design. But these go back to potentially 6,000 BC or 8,000 years ago. And these are called almendres. There's various, this is the first structure that was built there. There's kind of 2 structures that got developed up until about 4,000 BC. I've been there, I've checked it out. It's a remarkable site. And they're very rounded, almost egg-shaped stones, often with cut marks again, and beautiful carvings on them, such as the shepherd's crook and also certain spirals, which we find obviously in different parts of the world. We have Karahunj in Armenia. This is a remarkable site. Again, this is very, very ancient. And again, this could go back to 5,000 or 6,000 BC, potentially older. And many of the stones here have holes carved in them, which are thought to be, linked with observing the sun and the moon at the solstice and equinoxes. And even academic archaeoastronomer Clive Ruggles believes that this date is correct and these were indeed used for this purpose. Again, potentially aligning to Cygnus. This just shows you what it looks like now in the sort of hills of Armenia. Very pointed stones, rough hewn stones, but very important site nonetheless. And it has avenues coming off in certain directions. Now, although it's not a perfect circle, it does fit in with the whole ethos of what a stone circle is, with the astronomical alignments, the high placement in the landscape, and the various geometries that they encode. Another very ancient stone circle has been found in southern Egypt, which is pretty much exactly on the Tropic of Cancer. It's called Nabta Playa. Now, this is a very small stone circle. There's a 2 or 3 constructions there. Unfortunately, they got damaged and they've now been replaced and put into the Aswan Nubian Museum in Egypt. And you can go and visit this. Actually, it's on display outside the main museum. And this potentially dates to, you know, there's a big debate about this, but several thousand BC, potentially 5,000 BC. And there's different astronomical alignments associated with this, even though it's a very, very small stone circle. Robert Bival, Thomas Brophy have been doing research on this. And they think could be the precursor, it could be the inspiration for the geometry and also for the mathematics and astronomy that ended up in the Pharaonic civilization and the building of the pyramids much, much later. This is what it looks like now. This is on display in the museum. And it really is a very interesting little site. And we go there when we do our tours there, because it's really just a small part, but a very important part of the prehistory of ancient Egypt. Even in Libya and North Africa, we have Stonehenge type trilithons have been recorded. These are some very old photos from the late 1800s, early 1900s. What's interesting as well, if we hark back to Stonehenge, the legend states in the history of the kings of Britain that the stones of Stonehenge originally came from North Africa and were taken to Ireland before they ended up on Salisbury Plain. So the fact is, you're finding these exact same style trilithons in North Africa. So how would Geoffrey of Monmouth, writing this in the 1100s, know this? He hadn't visited there. Somehow he knew, or somehow the story came out and it got recorded that indeed identical type megalithic constructions were built in North Africa. We have many examples all across the area, mainly around Tripoli, Libya. And you can just see the size of them. It's pretty much the same size as what we find at Stonehenge. And a friend of mine a few months ago sent me this. This is actually from Tunisia. So this is another construction, which is just over the border from Libya. There's a debate about some of these because the academic version is that they were Roman grape presses, which I'm not sure how you would crush grapes with that, but it's worth a try. But these are found, you know, all over this area of North Africa. And a lot of these places you can't really go to, especially Libya, to investigate. But they're very sophisticated masonry as well, like we find at Stonehenge with the mortise and tenon joints. We have the different sort of shape carvings of the stones and so forth. And this has been, you know, known about for a few hundred years, but not really had a chance to be investigated. Also in Libya, this area, we find classic type stone circles. This is an illustration done in 1882, suggesting that indeed this whole area of North Africa was very megalithic. This is most certainly the case because in Morocco, we have one of the most impressive stone circles in the world. It's called Masura. This was written about extensively by Robert Temple in his book Egyptian Dawn back in 2010. And he believes, you know, after investigating it, looking at the geometry and looking at the, you know, astronomy and also finding the megalithic yard within this site, he believes this was the same people who were involved in the construction of Stonehenge and other sites in Britain. If that was the case, that gives another connection with this mythos that was created by Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 1100s. It may have been a certain ancient king was buried there. There's even connections with Hercules being buried there, going back into all the ancient Greek myths and so forth. And it shows you a plan of it. Again, it's a huge stone circle, and it's had a huge tumulus built within it. This is thought to be the burial place of the ancient king or even Hercules. And so we have these very large uprights here. We have various constructions around the edge as well here we see. An absolutely remarkable place, and I'm keen to go there, maybe able to visit there quite soon. That's an aerial photograph from 1970 of what it looked like, but it's been looked after now. It's been taken care of. There's keepers there who kind of look after it. But other parts of Africa have stone circles. These are the Senegambian stone circles that date to around the 3rd century BC onwards. They're not that ancient, but there's thousands of them, absolutely thousands of them, with tumuli nearby. These have all been cut and shaped stones of this volcanic rock. And there's too many to mention here, but these no one knows exactly who built these or why exactly they were built. There's suggestions they were astronomically aligned, they were marking the stars, and you can check out this Facebook page, the Eco Gambia Stone Circles. It's a group of people who live out there, run this eco village, and they take visitors to go and check them out. But these have been known about for a very, very long time. This is some of the astronomy which is believed it could represent different parts of the sky. They think, but this is speculative but interesting nonetheless. There's over 100 recorded structures, stone circle type structures in Algeria. They have a southwest alignment, which is quite intriguing in itself because that could be winter solstice. There's dolmens are found in the area around here as well. Again, the dating of this is unclear, but probably a few hundred BC. Even in Peru, we find stone circle structures. Now, we find a lot of things in Peru, including these beautiful chulpa towers at a site called Silastani. Beautiful relief carvings, much like we find at Göbekli Tepe, in fact. Elongated skulls and other such things. But at Silastani, which is next to Lake Titicaca, it's a chulpa site, which means funerary tower, built by the Koya people before the Inca, probably around, they believe, around 500 or so AD, but it could be much older. They have these strange astronomically aligned circles just at the base of the bluff that the chulpas are actually built upon. And they have entrances in certain orientations. They have slightly different orientations, but pretty much to the east or southeast. And again, you can see it here. And this is an anomaly, really. These really shouldn't be here, but they are very, very interesting. You see one of the great chulpa towers in the background. And these weren't any taller than this. It's a little bit taller. Some of the stones were neater and tidier. But again, it just shows you that this idea of creating astronomically aligned stone circles is a worldwide phenomenon. There's my colleague and friend Freddie Silver. You can see they're not huge stones. This is actually one of the smaller circles, but it gives you an indication of the size of at least one of them there. Even in Argentina, we have the Parque Los Menhirs. This is a fascinating area. Not had a chance to go here just yet, but these have got holes carved in them. There's sort of circular arrangements. There's beautiful, almost computer-created carvings on them. 141 of these have been recorded. 700 BC to 800 AD, very vague estimate. Not dissimilar to what we find at San Augustine megalithic complex in Colombia, which incidentally has European-style dolmens in Colombia. But these are just a fascinating sight, an anomaly. Not many people go and visit these, but it's believed they may have been to do with fecundity and fertility because of their phallic shape. But that's just a theory. No one's really clear of exactly what their purpose was. Even in Australia, we find evidence of circular megalithic construction, or circular-ish. We can see this almost plectrum-shaped stone, which was not too far, not too far from Melbourne. And you can see it here. This was reported by various newspapers about a decade ago. But it seems to show stone arrangements marking the different times of the year in Australia, which could be tens of thousands of years old. And it was only first really realised back in 1977 when they realised they may have been ancient. There's other arrangements of stones. This is near Mullumbimby, near Byron Bay. Now this has all been destroyed. It was actually destroyed in the 1950s. But this is what they believe it could have looked like. It's like two stone circles or two circular arrangements linked by an avenue of stones. I actually went to this site with Stephen Evan Strong back in, I think, 2012, 2013. And this is some information about it, but unfortunately it got bulldozed. But because the farmer's son was told to get rid of the stones, because if it ended up being an Aboriginal site, they would have lost their land and so forth. So they had to get rid of it. And the guy felt so guilty years later when he realised it could have been one of the most important stone sites in all of Australia. There's even a huge mound there at the site as well, which has been cut into. It's been partly excavated, and it's just bizarre. It seems like a complete anomaly. It really shouldn't be there. This was us when we were investigating the site. And you can check out more information at forgottenorigin.com, which is Steve and Evan Strong's website. There's even circles that are being recorded in Japan. I mean, there's a few you can actually still go and see there, but it's unclear about exactly how old they are. There's one reported in 1861, which is actually under the water off the coast of Japan. And it got reported, and nearby they found giant skeletons. You get these very strange statues that are not dissimilar to what you find in places like Colombia and Peru and so forth in Japan itself. That's a whole other story. But even here, there are reports, and there are some stone circles you can still visit. And in North America, we find examples as well. I think this is Burnt Hill Stone Circle in Massachusetts, and can't really visit this anymore, but it is, again, potentially one of the most important stone circles in North America, and there are a few. And it was actually written about by H.P. Lovecraft, and he spent his time around this area exploring, and he even referenced it in one of his books, The Dunwich Horror. And in the opening chapter, the tale includes a reference to great rings of rough-hewn stone columns on the hilltops, more generally attributed to the Indians than to the settlers. And he actually wrote this, and he was living right near here, a couple of hundred years ago. So this is very interesting that it even gets a reference back then. This is a place called near Pelham. It's not in Pelham, it's near Pelham in New Hampshire. It's not too far, only 20, 30 miles perhaps from America's Stonehenge, which isn't a stone circle, but it's a megalithic site. Used to be called Mystery Hill in New Hampshire. And this is an arrangement of stones about 114 feet across by 62 feet wide. It's like a kind of egg shape, but it appears that it could have been there at least from 1629 when some surveys were done of the area. It's another view of it. It got slightly moved from its original location, but it's believed it could have been built by the Native American people very, very long time ago. This is roughly what they think it looks like. It's a rough shape of it, very unusual shape, and an anomaly really in North America. Even on Catalina Island off the coast of California, this is a really interesting account. It's been destroyed, but there was potentially a massive stone circle was supposed to have been here. This was reported by Don Juan Cabrillo in 1542. And he talked about, he's one of the earliest people who went there, and he talked about a vigorous kind of population was there. Then we have various people visiting there over the years, including chronicler Father Torquemada, where he found what he called a level prairie, very well cleared, where the Indians were assembled to worship an idol which was there. And he talked about a temple formed by a large circle of long stones pointing upwards towards the midday sun, in the center of which was the idol. And so we have a kind of reference to a stone circle on the remote island, well, at the time, really, off the Californian coast, not, virtually parallel with Los Angeles nowadays. And the interesting thing is, myself and Jim Villa have been researching this area, and hundreds of accounts of skeletons, some very tall, over 9 foot tall, some of them, are being found on this island, with reports from the 1500s of blonde and red-haired giants living on this particular area. And there's dating on this island, and some of the islands around there, all the Channel Islands of California, go back to between 20 and 40,000 years. So there's something very important happening down there. And potentially, they were building stone circles. So even in modern times, stone circles are still revered by megalithomaniacs like myself, and stonemasons like Jim Vieira, and geomancers like Sean Kerwan and others. And this is actually a photo we took in Brittany. I couldn't believe someone had put a recent sign on a megalith, so we decided to get a good photo of that. But there's various stone circles. This one has been built it's in this hilltop in Somerset. It was built about 15 years ago. This is one of the circles I was involved in building in 2006 at the big green gathering site up on the Mendip Hills in Somerset. And this is a plan of it. We actually designed this. Well, mainly John Martineau and Shaw Kerwin designed this, to be honest with you. And it's a very interesting design because it's unusual design because it's 17 stones. You don't get many stone circles with just 17 stones. But it has multiple alignments, so we decided to make it a proper stone circle. And so even today, we're finding that, there's an inspiration, there's a modern renaissance in working with these stones in circular arrangements. It seems something sort of built within us that humans just want to do when they want to connect with the land, they want to study the stars, they want to observe the movements of the sun and moon and really connect, with the earth energies of the land. And so, we feel that there's an important aspect not only to preserve sites, but if inspired, to actually create sites and get into the mindset of our wonderful ancestors who were constructing all these things that we so very much enjoy today. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you got a good overview of the great world of stone circles.